Hey, love.
Hey, how are you?
Oh, good. Okay. So let's see how we do here. Um, my first meeting with Love, the doula. So let's go back and talk about trained and focus on women of color, their health disparities, et cetera, et cetera. I'll let you start.
Okay. Um, so I'll introduce myself. I'm Shantae Love. I am a birth doula. I run Brown Girl Birthing. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, as well as browngirlbirthing.com. And so I am a birth doula and a lactation counselor, which is basically a breastfeeding specialist. And I
Hmm.
do a lot of advocacy work for women, but specifically women of color, aka Black women, because of the health disparities that we face in the maternal world. We're dying at 3 to 4 times a higher rate during childbirth or as a result of childbirth. So, any death during the first year after you give birth or during childbirth that's related to complications of labor and delivery. This includes, hemorrhaging. This includes like high blood pressure issues, aka preeclampsia, um, as well as other complications like infections and all type of things related to that when it comes to birthing. So, um, basically, I work with moms to educate them on their bodies. Um, I try to inform them of natural remedies that they can use in order to help progress labor, exercises that they can use, and things of that nature, as well as educating them on the interventions that are during childbirth, such as induction, which we they use a drug called pitocin. So all of those interventions are fine, but we want to make sure that we know the risk and we know that they can cause some health issues if we are not taking everything into consideration. So things like, induction and how it increases the risk that we'll have a C-section. Um, so now when we are making the decision if we should induce, we need to make sure that we're taking into consideration the fact that, okay, this may cause me to have a C-section. If I have an emergency C-section, what are the complications? What are the risk factors? What does this mean for my baby? What does this mean for me and my body? So just educating women on that, and on ways that we can kind of avoid having to use that. Like, have we tried all of our other options before we decide to use this option? And many times women don't know that there are other options to this. Our OBs are only presenting this option. And so
Exactly.
we're like, okay, the doctor said that this is the option. And, we assume that the doctor always has our best interest at heart. And that's just not necessarily always true that they have our best interest at heart. And there's a lot of implicit bias, you know, just like we're seeing in all aspects of being Black in America. So
Hmm.
it's our goal to help close that gap, and help decrease those rates. And I do that in the aspect of breastfeeding as well. Black women breastfeed at lower rates than Hispanic and white women. And we're finding that our babies die at a much higher rate during that first year of life. Um, And so there is some correlation between breastfeeding and that, as well as, the fact that if we breastfeed for 2 years during our life, we can decrease the rate of breast cancer by nearly 25%, for the most aggressive form of breast cancer, which
Mm-hmm.
we have at higher rates. Black women, when I say we, I mean Black women, have at
Mm-hmm.
much higher rates than women of other races. So just educating about that, about how there are many other health benefits to breastfeeding for Black women. It decreases the rate of certain diabetes, as well as in our babies, and, a lot of people don't know that the composition changes constantly. Our babies' saliva backwashes, and so if they're exposed to germs, if they're exposed to any type of virus, our body will begin to make antibodies for that virus and help them fight it off. Just as well as ear infections and other types of infections, breast milk can
Right.
help with that. Cuts,
Right.
scrapes, all of those things. So it's just a lot of um, information, a lot of things that people don't know. And so my goal is to just get the information out there, help educate, and help make sure that when we're going into childbirth, we're as educated, we feel supported, and we feel prepared to ask questions from our doctors and our nurses, ask for more, or ask them to be thorough and realize that they're being paid to take care of us, and we deserve the care that everyone else gets. And sometimes it's sad, but we have to advocate for that care. um, it's just not going to be given to us. Sometimes we have to say, like, no, no, um, I need
Right.
you to double check this. No, I understand
That's
that you
right.
don't feel like my pain is at the level it is, but it is. So I need you to write that in my chart that I told you that I had this pain and you did
Right.
not
Because
address it.
yeah, and a lot of people are, especially in the medical industry, they'll always ask, what is your pain level on a scale of 0 to 10?
Mm-hmm.
But then we also have nurses and other professionals that think people are drug seeking if they say, oh, I'm at a level 10, because no one can interpret your level of pain.
Exactly.
So right. That brings I have a question for you. Um, like, do you prefer to work with DOs versus MDs now that most people are starting to realize that a DO will take all areas psychologically, mentally, physically, spiritually, and help you in making healthy choices or being able to assist on a different level. What do you think about that? DOs versus MDs?
I don't have a preference. I can't say that I've worked with any DOs yet. In the birthing world, we deal a lot with like midwives
Okay.
versus um OBs, or medical doctors. And I don't necessarily have a preference. I feel like pretty similar. Typically, midwives are coming from a more holistic point of view, which,
Mhm.
obviously it is preferred. But there are definitely OBs that have that mindset and that will try to use minimal intervention. They will not suggest
Mhm.
intervention unless it's absolutely necessary, which is the way
Okay.
that it should be. Like, we
Mhm.
shouldn't be offering interventions that are unnecessary, and that
Mhm.
can cause further complications if there's no necessity for it.
Exactly.
So, um, obviously, working with someone that has a more holistic point of view and that will be open to, waiting and using intervention only when necessary is preferred. But for me, I feel like I'm more needed when there's doctors and midwives and medical professionals that aren't perspective, because that's when we need advocates. That's when we need someone to say, like, hey, wait, hold on, like, you're putting this intervention on the table and I don't understand why. That is when I feel like the clients need the most support, when they do have this doctor that's not listening, or this nurse that is not listening. That is when
Right.
I find that I'm most helpful to clients. But even in those situations where they do, it's just great to have that support. Like, birth is hard. Giving birth is
Right.
hard. Like, it's not
It
easy.
is.
Like, we're going through a lot of physical changes, mental changes, emotional changes, and it's very overwhelming. And like, we're literally growing a life in the span of 10 months.
Exactly. And
So,
the thing that I can, I have one son, but even back in that day, I still practice uh, um, working with my breathing techniques. I
mhm,
didn't do
mhm,
Lamaze. I think when it was time for me to go to Lamaze classes, I was 3 weeks premature. But
mhm,
luckily, I had the tools and learned how to breathe um, to help me with my delivery, which was
mhm,
26 hours of labor. So had
mhm,
I have not had yoga, Pilates, who
mhm.
knows what could have happened. But yeah, I'm sorry, let me ask you one more thing.
Sure.
You mentioned, what keys do you think are missing when you mentioned that we're missing key things, key problems when giving birth before, during, and even post labor? What are the key factors that comes to mind for you?
Um, I think that a lot of times what I'm finding is like we're missing like the signs of preeclampsia. Like, that is probably the biggest. Like, we're missing those high risk women, or even the ones who they like their blood pressure, like, it's just too high. Like, there's not being enough intervention. When I leave the hospital and a week to 2 weeks later, my legs are still swelling, or I'm seeing spots, and I'm calling my doctor, like, no, I need to be in there. I need to
Hmm.
be being seen, because this is a sign that my pressure is elevated. Like, and then just it's a lot of hemorrhaging things, like, um after birth, like the amount of bleeding that's being um it's a lot of that. Sometimes it's infection too as well. Like, I'm having abdomen pain that's abnormal, and they're not checking, and so um there's some kind of infection, or I'm spiking a fever, and these things are kind of being missed sometimes. But the biggest thing that we see is when women are complaining of pain, which is
Hmm.
typically a sign of something else, something deeper. When their pain level is really elevated, it's typically like, some kind of sign of maybe excessive bleeding, or things like that. Those have been the most recent cases that I've seen. Like, there was a case in New York recently, as well as a case in Georgia, where they were complaining of the pain, and they essentially bled out. Like, it was just hemorrhaging, and they didn't make it. They didn't make it. But in all of those instances, the women had complained, and had informed their OB that they felt that something was wrong, that something wasn't right. And, you know,
Right.
it was missed. The ball was dropped. So,
Right. So they want us to be proficient, and that's
mhm.
my thing about the medical industry. They want us to be proficient and to be critical thinkers. But when you and this is my experience, when you are a person of color and
Mhm.
you have great critical thinking skills, but yet you're not labeled a PA or a doctor or MD.
Mm,
I think that's one thing that's important. We need to I think it's important to understand that we are a team. And if someone has critical thinking and the fact that we know our own culture and
mhm.
different things, then we should be able to add into the equation. Yes,
Yes.
they are the ones um that are,
They
I
have the
guess what you can
educational
say.
background.
There you
They
go.
have the educational background.
Right, but yet they don't have the wherewithal to say, okay,
Mhm.
let's take everybody has a part to play. Every
Yes.
and they should take us more seriously. Just because you don't have the PhD or PhD
Mhm.
or MD behind your name doesn't mean you're not qualified. It just
Mhm.
simply means that, you know, we have experiences, and sometimes our experiences outweigh that MD because we live in the community or we understand, you know, the facts, the features, the benefits of our own being, of our own ethnicity. And to
Right.
me, that sometimes trumps just understanding the mechanism of science, but we
Mhm.
also have to incorporate just old fashioned remedies. And that's why I say Eastern meets natural healing
Mhm.
because it all creates one thing, and the ultimate goal is a human being.
Mhm.
So that's what I do, work with people who fail to thrive, offer helpful hints, and work with them on a regime that works best for them.
Right.
So
Right.
let me get to this one last question for this segment.
Mhm.
Um, you mentioned colostrum, you mentioned breastfeeding.
Mhm.
So for those that aren't used to breastfeeding, can you give them facts, features, and benefits about post delivery? Like, say, for example, if when breastfeeding, what can one do naturally? Because I know they can't take like essential oils while they're
Mhm.
breastfeeding. But what do you have to say about that?
I would say that the best thing is supply and demand. Stay hydrated, stay fed, but most importantly, supply and demand. The more you nourish your baby, the more milk you will make. Our bodies make what we need. So when we're latching our baby on, when our baby is nursing, it sends a signal to our body, hey, I need to make more. And that is the biggest that is the most important thing that I found is that, when we're not producing enough, um we're probably not latching baby enough. And I think a lot of people don't realize like how our baby's stomachs are. When
Mhm.
they come out, they're literally the size of a marble. If you found like a little marble, toy marble that you would get, like, you know, that's the size of our baby's belly when they are first born. By the time they're a month, their bellies are the size of an egg. So their belly literally has basically quadrupled in the span of 1 month. And so when they first come out, they're nursing constantly. Like they're constantly want to be on you. And a lot of people take that as I'm not making enough milk. And that's not true. You're making the exact amount of milk that you're supposed to, and your baby is telling your body how much milk it needs. So their stomach is growing so rapidly that they're constantly having to tell your body, make more because my stomach's about to grow. My stomach is growing. Like, so when you
Oh, I think I lost you.
Hello?
We're back. We had some technical difficulties, but we're back. I've been speaking with Shantae Love of Brown Girl Birthing, birth doula, lactation counselor, and more. She's also on Facebook and Instagram, Brown Girl Birthing. So let's get back on track, Shantae. And I believe we were talking about the missing keys, lactation, midwives, and we'll just take it from there. Let's talk about colostrum and breastfeeding and